Welcome to the channel, where we share the real stories, struggles, sacrifices, and triumphs of undocumented immigrants living in America. Behind every immigration statistic is a human being with dreams, hopes, fears, and a journey worth understanding. In this podcast, we explore personal experiences, family sacrifices, career setbacks, resilience, immigration challenges, and the pursuit of a better future. Our goal is to create meaningful conversations that inform, inspire, and give a voice to stories that are often unheard. If you believe these stories matter, please support the channel by subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with your family, friends, and community. Your support helps us reach more people and continue bringing these important conversations to light. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's get started.
People look at me strangely when I tell them my father used to be a senior regional engineer before he became a janitor. Not because they think I'm lying, because they cannot connect the image of the man they see now with the man he used to be. Today, my father wakes up at 4:30 every morning in a small apartment outside Boston. His knees hurt when he walks. His hands are rough from years of construction work and warehouse labor. He cleans office buildings at night 3 days a week and does maintenance work under the table whenever contractors call him. But when I was little, my father was the smartest man I knew. Before America swallowed him, he was respected across half of Africa. I was 6 years old when we moved to the United States in 2009. My memories from back home are fragmented now, like photographs left too long in sunlight. But some scenes remain sharp. I remember our house. It had a large front gate and shiny tile floors that stayed cool, even during hot afternoons. My mother filled the house with plants and music. There was always laughter somewhere. My father traveled often for work, but whenever he returned from another country, he brought gifts from airports: small toy airplanes, chocolates, keychains with foreign flags. He worked for a multinational engineering company with operations across Africa. He supervised electrical infrastructure projects in different countries: Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa. At family gatherings, relatives spoke about him with admiration. "That boy has made it," my uncles used to say. And honestly, he had. My parents were successful. They owned properties. My father drove a company SUV. We attended private schools. We had house help. I never saw my parents worry about food or bills or survival. Looking back now, I realize my father was living the exact life immigrants in America spend decades trying to build. But he could not see that at the time. America looked bigger, cleaner, safer, more permanent. He believed moving to the U.S. would multiply our success, not erase it. So he sold almost everything: properties, land, vehicles. I still remember the weeks before we left. Relatives visiting constantly. Suitcases open everywhere inside the house. Adults talking about visas and opportunities and the future. My father walked around with the confidence of a man who believed he was leading his family towards something greater. My mother smiled often back then. I rarely see that version of her anymore. When we landed in Boston, I thought we had arrived inside a movie. The highways, tall buildings, cold air, fast English. I was fascinated by everything. I remember pressing my forehead against the car window while we drove from the airport. My father kept saying, "This country rewards hard work." I think he truly believed that. At first, things still felt temporary. We stayed with family friends while my parents searched for housing. My father wore suits to interviews and carried a leather folder full of engineering certifications and recommendation letters. Every evening, he returned home quieter. I didn't understand it then, but America had already started rejecting him. His experience meant nothing without legal work authorization. Companies lost interest the moment immigration paperwork appeared. The same man who once supervised regional engineering operations suddenly could not even secure an interview callback. Months passed. Then our visa situation became complicated, then expired. And slowly, without fully understanding how it happened, we became undocumented. That word changes everything. People who have legal status do not understand how quickly life shrinks when you lose it. My father stopped talking confidently, stopped dressing sharply, stopped discussing future plans. Survival replaced ambition. He started taking cash jobs, construction first, then moving furniture, then cleaning offices, then warehouse work. I remember one winter morning, waking up early and seeing him sitting alone in the kitchen, wearing 2 jackets before leaving for work. Snow covered the windows outside. He looked exhausted in a way I had never seen before. My mother asked quietly, "Did you sleep at all?" He laughed softly and said, "I'll sleep when things stabilize." Things never stabilized. As a child, I noticed the transformation before I understood it. Back home, my father walked like a man the world respected. In America, he walked carefully, almost apologetically. Fear entered our lives slowly. Fear of police, fear of immigration authorities, fear of paperwork, fear of hospitals, fear of attention. Everything became temporary. Apartments, jobs, plans. My parents argued more as the years passed. Not violently, just tired arguments. Quiet arguments. The kind that comes from prolonged disappointment. I once overheard my mother crying late at night while speaking to relatives back home. "We gave away everything," she whispered. My father worked constantly, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs at once. I rarely saw him resting. His body began deteriorating from labor work he was never meant to do long term. But here is the strange thing about my father. Even after America broke him financially, intellectually, he remained extraordinary. When I struggled with mathematics in middle school, he taught me algebra using old notebooks at the kitchen table. When I became interested in robotics during high school, he explained circuitry better than my teachers could. He still thought like an engineer, even while spending nights cleaning office bathrooms in downtown Boston. That contradiction shaped my entire childhood. I knew my father was brilliant, but I also knew brilliance alone could become powerless in America. By the time I entered high school, I had started understanding the depth of my parents' sacrifice and regret. They never said it directly, but I could feel it hanging inside our apartment like humidity. America had not elevated us. It had trapped us. My mother, who once managed businesses and properties back home, spent years working under the table, sewing clothes and assisting elderly patients for cash. My father developed chronic back pain from construction jobs. Yet somehow, they protected me from the worst of it. They pushed me relentlessly toward education. "Your mind is your escape," my father always told me. I think part of him hoped I could reclaim the life he lost. When I was accepted into Massachusetts Institute of Technology to study engineering, My father cried for the first time in front of me. Not small tears, deep, uncontrollable crying. I remember him sitting on the edge of his bed, holding my acceptance letter with shaking hands. "You did it, son," he kept whispering. But even in that moment of pride, sadness was present too. Because MIT represented both triumph and tragedy. His son was entering one of the greatest engineering schools in the world, and he himself remained undocumented after 15 years of sacrifice. Sometimes I visit campus late at night after studying and think about him. At MIT, professors discuss innovation, advanced systems, infrastructure design, and technological progress. Students dream openly about changing the future. And often I think, my father belonged in places like this. Not carrying buckets and cleaning supplies through office buildings after midnight. Not hiding from immigration systems. Not destroying his body for cash wages. There is one memory I cannot forget. I was maybe 16. My father and I were riding the Red Line train home after one of my school events. Across from us sat two businessmen discussing engineering contracts and energy systems. My father quietly listened without joining the conversation. But I could see from his face that he understood everything they were discussing at a much deeper level than they did. When the men exited the train, my father looked down at his hands for a long time. Then he smiled sadly and said in that deep African accent, "Life is strange, eh?" At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. Now, I do. America transformed my father into two different men living inside one body. One was the accomplished engineer who once traveled across Africa solving technical problems for multinational companies. The other was the undocumented immigrant carrying tools through freezing Boston mornings, trying to survive. Both men are real. And I think the hardest part is that nobody here ever got to see the first version. Now he is 45 years old. His hair has turned gray. His shoulders curve slightly from years of labor. He walks slower. But every time I bring home an engineering project from MIT, his eyes light up again for a few minutes, and I catch glimpses of the man he used to be before fear and uncertainty consumed his life. Sometimes I wonder whether coming to America was the greatest mistake my parents ever made. I think my father wonders that too, but he never says it aloud. Maybe because after sacrificing 15 years, admitting regret would feel unbearable. Or maybe because, despite everything, he still hopes my future will somehow justify the destruction of his own. Sometimes, I think memory itself is cruel. Because I remember enough to know exactly what my parents lost. My father works whatever jobs he can find under the table. Construction, demolition, snow removal, warehouse labor, office cleaning, cash jobs with no security. He leaves before sunrise most mornings, wearing heavy boots and faded jackets layered against Boston winters. By the time he returns home, his body moves like someone much older than 45. But the most painful part is what happens when he talks about engineering. His entire face changes. A few months ago, I brought home a difficult circuit systems assignment from MIT. I was struggling badly with part of the design analysis. My father sat beside me at our tiny kitchen table while steam from my mother's cooking filled the apartment. At first, he just glanced at the equations casually. Then, something happened. The exhausted laborer disappeared. Suddenly, he was explaining advanced electrical concepts with astonishing clarity, sketching diagrams rapidly on scrap paper, solving problems faster than I could even process them. For nearly 2 hours, he spoke with the confidence and sharpness of the man he used to be. I remember staring at him, thinking, this is who my father really is. Not the undocumented man cleaning office buildings downtown at midnight. Not the immigrant contractor waiting for cash payments from dishonest supervisors. An engineer. A brilliant one. When he finished helping me, he became quiet again. He stared at the equations for a long moment before saying softly, I used to do this every day. That sentence broke my heart more than anything else he has ever said. Because underneath, it was another sentence he did not say aloud. And now, I don't. At MIT, I sit beside students whose parents are executives, professors, surgeons, and tech founders. Many of them grew up with stability so complete, they barely notice it exists. Meanwhile, my parents spent 15 years hiding from uncertainty. I have watched my mother count cash carefully at the kitchen table, trying to stretch groceries another week. I have seen my father come home limping after carrying construction materials all day in freezing weather. And yet, neither of them ever allowed me to lower my academic standards. Education is the one thing nobody can steal from you, my father repeated constantly. That sentence built my entire life. I studied obsessively because I understood something many of my classmates never had to understand. Failure would not only disappoint me, it would make my parents' suffering meaningless. One evening, I found my father sitting on the apartment stairs, staring into the distance. You okay? I asked. He nodded slowly. You know, he said quietly, when I was your age, I thought I would change the future too. There was no bitterness in his voice. That made it worse somehow. Because I know my father does not hate America. He hates what survival inside America turned him into. Sometimes, late at night, after my parents sleep, I study at our kitchen table while listening to the sounds of the apartment. Old pipes rattling, traffic outside, my father coughing softly in the bedroom from years of construction dust and cold weather. And often I think about the strange mathematics of immigration. How one man can be highly respected in one country and invisible in another. How intelligence alone guarantees nothing. How sacrifice sometimes destroys the exact life it was meant to improve. But I also think about something else. Despite 15 years of exhaustion, fear, instability, and regret, my father still managed to raise a son capable of sitting inside MIT classrooms. That matters, even if the price was unbearably high. The semester I turned 21, my father suffered a back injury that forced him to stop working for nearly 6 weeks. That was when I finally understood how fragile our entire life really was. For 15 years, my father had been the pillar holding everything together. No matter how difficult things became, he always found another job. Another contractor, another warehouse, another construction site. But one icy February morning, while helping carry heavy drywall sheets up 3 flights of stairs during a renovation project, he felt something tear in his lower back. He collapsed. The contractor drove him home because calling an ambulance would have created questions nobody wanted to answer. I still remember opening the apartment door and seeing my father leaning against another man's shoulder. At first, I thought he had suffered a heart attack.
The strongest man I knew could barely walk. My mother rushed forward. "What happened?" "I'm fine," he lied. He was not fine.
For the next several weeks, he could barely move without pain. Watching him struggle to stand from a chair felt surreal. This was the same man who once supervised engineering projects across multiple countries. The same man who spent years carrying our family on his shoulders. Now, even getting out of bed required effort. Because he could not work, the financial pressure became immediate. Undocumented workers do not receive safety nets. No paid leave, no workers' compensation, no protection. When they stop working, income stops instantly. I began taking additional campus jobs while continuing my studies. My mother increased her hours caring for elderly clients under the table. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in my parents' eyes. Not the familiar anxiety that had accompanied our lives for years. Something deeper. Age. My father was getting older. His body was breaking down. And suddenly, the future looked terrifying. One evening, about a month after his injury, I came home from campus and found him sitting alone at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. My mother was working. Outside, snow drifted past the window. My father was staring at an old photograph. I recognized it immediately. It had been taken 16 years earlier. Our house back home. The one we sold. The one that existed now only in memory. I sat down across from him. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. "Do you think I made a mistake?" His voice was barely above a whisper. I knew exactly what he meant. The move, America, everything. For years, nobody in our family had spoken honestly about that question. It sat between us constantly, but remained untouched. I looked at him carefully. His hair was mostly gray now. Deep lines surrounded his eyes. The man in the photograph looked like his older brother, rather than his younger self. "I don't know," I admitted. He nodded slowly. Then he said something I will never forget. "When I sold everything, I thought I was buying your future." His eyes remained fixed on the photograph. "I never imagined I was selling mine." The silence that followed felt enormous. For a moment, I saw not my father, but a human being carrying 16 years of accumulated regret. People often imagine regret as one dramatic realization. It isn't. Regret is usually thousands of small moments collected over time. Missed opportunities, missed birthdays, missed versions of yourself. My father had lost more than money. He had lost his profession, his status, his confidence, entire years that could never be recovered. Back home, former colleagues had become directors, executives, and company presidents. Some owned engineering firms. Others advised governments on infrastructure projects. Meanwhile, my father spent his 40s carrying construction materials through Boston winters. The comparison haunted him. But despite everything, he never stopped encouraging me. Never. Not once. Even during his injury, he still asked about my classes, my exams, my projects. One evening, I showed him a power systems design project I was working on. His face lit up immediately. For 2 hours, he discussed load balancing, distribution systems, and infrastructure planning with an enthusiasm I had not seen in years. Watching him explain engineering was like watching a retired musician sit at a piano. The talent never disappeared. The opportunity did. That realization became increasingly difficult for me to accept. I began looking at my professors differently. Not with resentment, but with perspective. Many of them had built extraordinary careers. They deserved their success. But my father possessed the same intellectual ability, perhaps more. The difference was not intelligence. The difference was circumstance. One decision. One immigration status. One chain of events. Life is often less fair than people want to believe. Graduation approached quickly. 4 years at MIT passed faster than I thought possible. The day I received a job offer from a major engineering company, I called my parents immediately. My mother cried before I finished speaking. My father said very little. He simply listened. Then quietly said, "Good." But I knew him well enough to hear the emotion hidden beneath that single word. A few weeks later, graduation arrived. The campus was crowded with families carrying cameras, flowers, and pride. Parents posed beside buildings and statues. Children hugged grandparents. Everyone seemed to be celebrating not just achievement, but possibility. My parents sat together in the audience. My mother wore her best dress. My father wore the only suit he still owned. It was the same suit he had brought from Africa 16 years earlier. He had gained weight since then. The sleeves sat differently. The fabric looked older. But he insisted on wearing it. As my name was called and I walked across the stage, I looked toward them. My mother's face was wet with tears. My father was smiling. A genuine smile. The kind I remembered from childhood. For a brief second, he looked like the man from before America. After the ceremony ended, people surrounded me offering congratulations. Professors, friends, classmates. Eventually, I found my parents standing slightly apart from the crowd. My father pulled me into a hug. Then he held my shoulders and looked directly into my eyes. "You finished what I started." I immediately shook my head. "No." His expression showed confusion. "No, Dad," I said. "I only got here because of you." He looked away. I could tell he was fighting emotion. For years, he had measured his life against what he lost. But standing there, I wanted him to understand something. His story was bigger than failure. Much bigger. Yes, he lost his engineering career. Yes, he lost property. Yes, he spent 15 years working jobs far beneath his abilities. Those things were true. But another truth existed alongside them. He raised a son in the middle of uncertainty. He protected a family despite instability. He transformed sacrifice into opportunity for someone else. That mattered too. A few months after graduation, I started my first engineering job. The first paycheck felt surreal. Not because of the money, because of what it represented. One evening, I brought my parents to dinner. Nothing fancy, just a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor. At the end of the meal, I handed my father a small envelope. Inside was a set of documents. He opened them slowly. At first, he didn't understand. Then he froze. The papers were for a house. Not a mansion, not luxury, just a modest home with a small yard. Enough space, enough dignity, enough room to breathe. My mother covered her mouth. My father's hands trembled. For a long time, nobody spoke. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve this. I shook my head. Maybe not. He laughed through tears. Then I finished. But you earned it. That night, after we returned home, I woke around 2 a.m. and found him sitting alone in the living room. The apartment was dark. Boxes were already stacked against the wall for the upcoming move. He was holding one of his old engineering notebooks, the same ones he had carried from Africa 16 years earlier. I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then he closed the notebook gently. "You know," he said, "for a long time I thought America took everything from me." He paused. "Now?" He looked toward the boxes, toward the future, toward the possibility that still remained. "Now, I think life is more complicated than that." I understood what he meant. The losses were real. The regret was real. Nothing could erase 16 difficult years. Nothing could return the career he lost. Nothing could restore the house, the status, or the life left behind. But the story did not end there. Because sometimes the final measure of a life is not what a person manages to keep. Sometimes it is what survives because the person refused to quit. And despite everything America had taken from my father, one thing survived. Hope. Wounded, exhausted, delayed for far too long, but alive. And for the first time since I was 6 years old, it finally felt like enough.